Fabulous. Good. Well, thanks for coming along, guys. This is Russell. Who's are you actually employed by Fareham College, or is it you're independent of Fareham?
I work for Intequal. We are a independent training provider. So we have some associations with some of the colleges. I think it was Totton College. Not Fareham. It was Carol.
Carol put me in touch with you. Okay, yeah. But
yeah,
I don't know where Fareham came from then, so my apologies with that one.
No, that's absolutely fine.
So you're independent of the colleges, but work with them.
Yeah, so I mean, over the years, I've formed various different allegiances. I mean, I've been doing this job now for 11 years. And at different points along the way, you know, we've had relationships with Fareham and Totton and Portsmouth and Barton Perivale, you know, for one thing or another. Sometimes I've gone to them and given talks to some of the students about IT and digital apprenticeships, and very much with Carol, that's how the relationship came about, that I was going up there and sort of helping those guys out by giving talks to some of their sort of second year college students about apprenticeships and vocational training in general and career pathways. And then that relationship with Carol has sort of built over the years, I guess, and then Carol puts me in touch with employers who are interested to learn more about apprenticeships and funding, and particularly with Intequal, you know, what our USPs are, what we, you know, where we the sort of space that we specialize in. So, but as far as delivery goes, we're independent. So yeah, okay. we fall under that category. So if I just explain sort of who I am and my role at Intequal. So I've been with Intequal for 11 years now, as I say, pretty much from the point where Intequal was a startup, or we were called the IT Skills Management Company then. So my role is very client facing, it's very employer facing. So very much a point of sale, if you like, of the apprenticeship, and but I think moreover than that, you know, my role as principal consultant, and I think with any of the consultants at Intequal, is to act as sort of information, advice and guidance point, as well as, even if there is, you know, no immediate requirement for an apprenticeship with a business, you know, we're all more than willing to give up our time to help advise people, like I did just recently with Stephanie, Kevin, that you put me in touch with. It's not the right time, you know, for them to have an apprentice, and that was obvious to me. But you know, it was a really worthwhile call for her, because I filled in some of the gaps, if you like, in her knowledge about apprenticeships and what's available. As far as Intequal goes, we are a IT and digital specialist. So we don't deliver anything outside of those particular skill sets. Yep. And that goes right from, we deliver IT technical salesperson, digital marketing, right through to the more technical infrastructure technician and software developer, software tester, you know, data analyst standards as well. So right across the broad spectrum of different skills in the IT and digital sector, that, you know, that's where we are, and we have no desire to go outside of that, you know, outside of that space. You know, that there are, as I'm sure you know, and some of the guys on the call know, there is a significant skills gap in the sort of digital space. And you don't have to look too far on the business pages to, you know, to find evidence of commentary about that. So as far as I think, am I right in assuming that everybody on this call is sort of interested in the digital marketing and that particular standard? Is that right?
That's where we've come from, Russell.
Yeah.
There will be some people that are in this sort of more the IT space. So if you can bring that in, because they'll be interested. Now I know that's your remit is beyond just marketing, but in the whole sort of IT infrastructure space as well. So yeah, do cover a bit of that. But everyone here is predominantly coming from a marketing point of view.
Okay, all right. Well, let me, if I can share my screen with everybody.
Yep, should I do that?
So if I share my screen and I bring this up. Well, no, that's not what I wanted. Hold on a second. Where have I gone? So this is the beauty of using software I've not used before. So how do
we can see a PDF there.
You can see this,
yep.
The digital marketer.
Digital marketer. Yeah, we can.
Okay, sorry, I don't know how.
The wonders of multiple screens.
Yeah, so this is the digital marketer PDF, and I can share this document with everybody after the call if they wish me to. So this PDF sort of gives a very if you like overview of the digital marketing apprenticeship. It talks about how we deliver it, the content, and how apprentices are assessed while they're on program. So as far as delivery goes, we have a remote solution, and up until pre-COVID, we were pretty much the only training provider in the country that had a 100% remote delivery solution. Of course, COVID changed everything, and some of the training providers that had a more traditional sort of classroom-based model had to move over to a remote delivery. But it's very much a work-based apprenticeship and what we describe as blended learning. So apprentices would not only on digital marketing, but also the IT apprenticeship standards. In the UK, if you're doing a standard, apprenticeships need to spend 20% of their time in what the government call off-the-job training. And essentially, in layman's terms, that means in a learning environment. So for us, the way that we work, the 20% is, so if, for argument's sake, if we, base it on a 40-hour week, so 8 hours a week needs to be in a learning environment. So an apprentice would spend 4 hours a week in a virtual classroom. So that will be two 2-hour sessions, and that might typically be a Tuesday morning and a Thursday morning. But once those sessions are set and they're on that training schedule, then they would stay on that for the 14 months of the practical period. The additional time that we would evidence as learning could be spent in a variety of different activities. So that could be shadowing a senior member of the company, doing some fact finding, some product learning, out on site doing, could we do it if you were showing at a trade show or something like that, very much a marketer piece, that we could use that as evidence of additional learning. It could be revision for exams. It could be self-study. Now, where the self-study piece comes in is that, and I'll come to how the apprentice is assessed in a second, it actually feeds into that, is the apprentice would put together a portfolio of evidence during the practical period of the apprenticeship, which is typically 14 to 16 months long. So what a lot of businesses are doing now when they're bringing an apprentice on, and it's something that we are actively encouraging, is you do the 2-2-hour sessions in the virtual classroom, and then they're setting aside maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at another time of the week to do some portfolio self-study. Because what that then does, it uses up some of that additional learning time that sometimes, depending on the business, some businesses might struggle to find activities, for shadowing a senior, somebody in the company. So to give some self-study time actually does give the apprentice time to go away, step away from their role, and actually think about their apprenticeship and the application of their knowledge that they're going to learn, and then to gather the evidence against the different competencies within the knowledge units of the apprenticeship. So as far as the digital marketing standard goes, there are 4 key areas of learning. So as you can see there, there's marketing principles, digital marketing business principles, principles of coding, and then Google Analytics. Now, each of these knowledge modules are standalone. So what I mean by that is they're taught in isolation. So they start one at the start of the apprenticeship, you go through that knowledge module. If there's an exam attached to it, you would go for a revision period, sit the exam, and then move on to the next knowledge module. What we never do is to try and overload an apprentice and give them too much learning at any one time by overlapping these knowledge modules. So as I say, they're taught in isolation, but very much they do build on one another and that knowledge. So as that knowledge increases, as they get more exposure to their role in the application of these skills, then that would build in, so marketing principles onto digital marketing business principles, because they have a synergy between them.
Would it always start in that order? So you'd always start with principles and then end up with analytics?
Pretty much so. There have been occasions when it hasn't, and that's been purely down to trainer availability, because not all of the knowledge modules may be taught by the same trainer. Each of our trainers have different specialisms, as you will appreciate, in the same way that you have an English and maths teacher in schools and colleges. It's no different to us. We have trainers that specialize in, say, principles of coding, which is the most significant one on here, because actually principles of coding sits within the software development sort of skill set. So you may well have a different trainer to the marketing principles because they are different knowledge bases, if you like. But more often than not, then they would start in that order, and that would always be the plan. Each of the knowledge modules has different outcomes, in the sense that some are certificated and some aren't. Particularly in the Google Analytics, there's a whole raft of different certificates that an apprentice can gain within the Google. It's the Google Garage, I think it's called, something like that. And as you can see down here, this very much taught. The analytical side of it is teaching the apprentice to understand, data collection, what you do with data, as I'm sure all of you guys know, who are involved in marketing. There's very little point running a marketing campaign if you don't know what to do with the data at the end of it and understand the data. So the Google Analytics is in there to give the apprentice the tools to be able to look at what is generated from social media campaigns, for instance. The principles of coding looks at, as you can see on the screen there, looks at some of the web side of it, also search engines, how cookies work. And the 2 marketing units are very much about, as you can see on the screen, it says on there, customer lifestyle, customer engagement, digital and social media strategies. I think, one of the good things with the young people that we find coming on to the digital marketing apprentices at the moment, certainly as far as social media goes, they're really savvy as to, social media and its structure and how it works. And typically, we've had some young people just recently that we've engaged and put onto program with businesses that actually have set up their own mini businesses, while they're at college, and have done some of these skills already. They've built their own website and they've run some social media campaigns. So it's not always the case that you're taking a young person from first base, because some of the skills and the knowledge, that you already have. And I think what in this case, what this what this program does, it sort of enhances that, but maybe also gives them some additional tools around the outside and brings it all together. And as I say, so these units are taught in isolation, and they are taught during the practical period of the apprenticeship. So at the moment, the digital marketing apprenticeship is 16 months long. It may well be extended. All IT and digital standards at the moment are going through a period of revision. They've started with the very sort of technical IT ones, and they're being released at the moment. But a lot of those standards we're seeing have been extended by 1 or 2 months. The digital marketing one at the moment is 16 months long. These knowledge units are taught in the first 14 months. So that's the practical period of the apprenticeship. And then at 14 months, the apprentice would go to Gateway and then go through to endpoint assessment. And if I just bring the PDF back up a little bit. So, and this is a sort of how the program comprises: the knowledge modules that I've just described to you, the portfolio that I've alluded to in that piece also. They will also undertake a project. And that will be a project that we would sit down with the business and predefine as to what's going to go in that project. So the apprentice can take some of the knowledge that we have taught in those knowledge modules and then apply it as competencies in the role that they're doing and align that to a project that's a meaningful project within the business. And that may well be, you know, if a business, I don't know, doesn't have any social media or any, you know, real good social media content, it may well be that the project is right. What we're going to do is we are going to enhance the business's visibility in social media. So it will be taking some of those digital marketing business principles from that knowledge unit and some of the skills from the Google Analytics, and then bringing them together in that application in the project, so the end result is meaningful for how the learner is assessed, but it's also meaningful for the business as well, because there's an end point for the business. So at the 14-month stage, the apprentice has gone through the program, gone through the knowledge modules, passed any of the exams that may be attached to the knowledge modules, and then would go to endpoint assessment. And the endpoint assessment has 4 areas in which the apprentice is assessed. And I'll go through them very briefly, and they're equally weighted. One is no more important than the other. There's a portfolio that they're assessed on, but that's already in place because we've put that together throughout the practical period. There is an employer reference, and that is a document that whoever the apprentice's direct report is would complete against a predetermined set of questions. And it is talking about, you know, the apprentice's journey with the business, how they've applied themselves, the knowledge that they've learned, the value that they've given to the business, those sort of questions. They would also do a synoptic project, which is a 3-day event, closed 7 hours a day against a predetermined area of knowledge and study, but the area of knowledge and study is related to their role and the apprenticeship standard they've been on. So they will bring together the knowledge that they've gathered and the experience that they've gathered over the 14-month period, and bring that together to produce one final piece of work. And then the final component of the endpoint assessment is an exit interview with an assessor from our endpoint assessment organization. And that is a telephone interview. It's not face-to-face, as I keep trying to say to the apprentices we've got on program and bringing on program now. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a telephone interview, and it's a way. It's actually quite a nice way for them to finish their apprenticeship, because even though there are some technical elements to that, it's also a way to give them a platform, if you like, to describe their experience while they've been on program. Have they enjoyed it? Was it worthwhile? What are their career aspirations? Have they been offered a contract, a full-time contract with the business, for instance? So very briefly, that is the digital marketing apprenticeship, how it's structured, what's in there, how it's assessed. Now, as far as the IT ones go, they're very similar in the sense of how they're delivered, as the 20% applies, how they are assessed traditionally has been the same, but as I've just already mentioned, the IT ones have just been revised, and all the exams have been removed from the IT one now, and they've moved to a much more holistic assessment model. And I think the Institute of Apprenticeships and IFATE have probably recognised that sitting in an exam is not the best way to measure the knowledge of a vocational based training program, because as we all know, exam is just a memory test more than anything. So the assessment is more of an ongoing holistic assessment over the duration of the apprenticeship. But by and large, the actual structure of the apprenticeships, how they're delivered, is the same. All that's different is what's actually taught. For instance, in the new information communication technician apprenticeship, it teaches cloud knowledge and networking and operating systems. So very much more infrastructure based as far as that goes. So they're the apprenticeships. Now, does everybody want me to touch on funding and how that works?
Yeah, I think it's a good one to look at that.
Would that
Russell?
be beneficial?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
So depending on the size of the business and whether or not you're a levy payer or a non-levy payer, would depend on obviously how it's funded. If you're a levy payer, then we would use the money that's in your levy pot. Now, to be a levy payer, your wage bill needs to be over £3 million, and then you pay 5%. I think it is. Yeah. Oh no, 0.5%. I think it is something like that. If you're non-levy, then you can get a whole load of funding from the government. But also at the moment, there are some additional cash incentives available as well. So if you're under 50 employees and the apprentice is under 19 at the point of enrolment, then you would get 100% funding. So that would cover the cost of the apprenticeship in its entirety, other than salary, of course. The salary is not covered by the government. All businesses need to pick that up. If the apprentice is over 19, then you're required by the Education and Skills Funding Agency to make a 5% co-investment to the cost of the apprenticeship. Now, as far as the digital marketer apprenticeship goes, that 5% equates to £550. So it's not a king's ransom necessarily. You don't have to pay it up front either. You can pay it in bite-sized invoices monthly of about £35–40, I think it is.
And there's no upper age limit on that, is there? It could be
absolutely. There's no age at all. The government, it used to be 24. The 25th birthday was the cut-off point a few years ago, but now we have apprentices on program that are in their 30s, their early 40s as well, that have gone for a career change more often than not.
There you go, Sabrina. You can apply to be an apprentice.
If your apprentice is under 19, you can also get a age grant from the government, which is £1,000. Mm-hmm. That's payable in 2 equal amounts, one after 90 days, one after 365 days. And at the moment, for all apprentices and all age groups, at the moment, I think it's been extended to August the 31st or September the 31st. I'd need to go and check. But there's, because it was supposed to stop in April, but the Chancellor extended it again. There's also a £3,000 incentive available from the government for taking on an apprentice, and that has no age gap to it.
Right.
And if your apprentice is under 19, you can get both. So you can get the £1,000 plus the £3,000 as an incentive, and both of them are paid on that same payment of 50% after I say 90 days. It does depend on where that 90 days date lands, because ESFA only have one payment sort of a payroll process each month, and if that 90 days lands a day after, you would go on to the next one, so it could extend to 120 days. But both of them are all intended purposes 3 or 4 months, and then 12 months to get 50% of those. So for taking on an apprentice at the moment, the government are throwing a load of cash at it to try and incentivize businesses to take on apprentices, because as we all know, with COVID being a crisis, it's often young people who are worst affected, by that, and particularly in employment. So the government are trying to incentivize, employers to take on apprentices.
And could it be an existing employee who we want to sort of move from one area to another?
No, not. You can put an existing employee on an apprentice, but the incentives are for new hires only.
New hires, okay.
So they can't be an existing member of staff.
So if we were to put somebody that's already employed who's over 19, we would pay £550, but they would get all the training.
Yes, absolutely right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely right. So that is the program, and that's the funding. I don't think there's anything else major that I need to cover as far as that goes. And I'm conscious that I've been talking constantly now for 25 minutes or so, and people might be sick of my voice by now.
You can certainly go to some questions if people have got any questions. I'll kick off with one. One of the problems a lot of us are having at the moment is actually finding candidates.
Yep.
So do you help with finding them? Do you mark it and say, right, we're looking for a particular person, and then sift through the ones that would you have potential?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we offer a full 360, so cradle to grave. We would do all of the recruitment for you. There's no cost to that either. Right. So regardless of whether we find you somebody or not, there is no cost to that. And yes, you're right. So we advertise across various different sites. We do use Indeed and Reed. We also use the National Apprenticeship Service website as well, and some of the more niche ones like Get My First Job or Not Going to Uni. So to take you through that process, so we would capture a job description from the employer. And that's not only the role, that would also include, there may well be some stuff on there that you want to see on a CV. Candidate needs to drive, for instance, or, you want to see, personal qualities, I guess is normally the section on the JD. So we would capture that, advertise it. Get the applicants come in. We would do an initial screen of them against those requirements, and to ensure that we can actually get the funding, because the government does set out some detail about people coming onto the program, and that sometimes that's about about previous qualifications, not necessarily anymore. Whereas the government always used to say that you had to have five GCSEs at A to C. That's not the case. That's not necessarily the case anymore, because it needs to be more inclusive than that. But as soon as we're happy from that point, we set the young people a short task to complete for us, and it's not too onerous. It's 5 questions. They could do it in an hour and a half, because if a young person is committed and they do want an apprenticeship and they are enthusiastic, then they should be willing to give up an hour and a half of their own time to add to their application, because I'm sure everybody on the call would agree that the CV of a 17, 18, 19-year-old doesn't actually tell you that much, about them. It might say, where they've been to school, college, the grades that they've done. They might have sat on a till at Sainsbury's for a year or two while they're at college, and they like playing football with their mates at the weekend. That sort of detail. So it's actively trying to encourage the applicant or the candidate to engage in their application. And the questions are, and they're not, and again, they're not, they're not too onerous. Why do you want to work in this sector? Go onto the website of the company that's hiring and give me a critique of their business. How do you think you did at school and college? So we're encouraging them to be quite self-effacing, which isn't necessarily always an easy thing for a young person. It's not necessarily an easy thing for everybody to do sometimes, but for a young person, why they feel that they would be a good apprentice, and describe yourself in 5 words. So you could do that, and there's a word limit on each of them. We're not looking for war and peace. It's 75 to 150 words for each of the first 4 questions. When we set them, we also book them in for a telephone interview with us. Now those questions then have to be back to us an hour before that telephone interview. So in a very gentle, hidden way, we're just starting to test, can they meet a deadline? What's their time management skills like? And then we would interview, and as long as that goes through okay, then we would interview them. And only at that point would we make a decision as to whether or not we thought they were suitable, and send across to the employer as a recommendation for interview. Yeah. Now, as far as availability goes, I think that is sometimes determined by a couple of different factors. Geography can have obviously an effect in that. I've worked with some businesses in, deepest, darkest Dorset, and we filled them, but it's taken a little bit longer. You go into the middle of London or the middle of Birmingham or the middle of Manchester, then that time to hire is a lot shorter, just because of pure population. It's that's not again, not rocket science.
And have you done many in this sort of South Hampshire area?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Fareham based. Yeah. So this is an area that I've been ploughing these fields around here for as I say, for 11 years. So I've got quite a few contacts and businesses that I work with down here that I've placed with and get repeat business from constantly. This where we are at this time of the year, so all the colleges are just kicking out now, so they're just finishing. I know my 18-year-old is just finishing his 2nd year at college and is beating the door down every day to get out of college. So some of this year's leavers are now starting to come into the market and start looking for jobs. Some of them won't. Some of them will want summer off. And they'll get to September, October, November, no doubt. And mum and dad will have a shotgun at their back and say, right, it's time to go and get a job now. You've had the summer off. You're not living off my credit card any longer. Yeah. So, go and get a job. But I think, for digital marketing, this is a really popular area for young people for all of the reasons that I've already discussed. This is the digital generation. And we would be typically we'd be looking for young people that at college had done, say, a creative media BTEC or a business BTEC, and have chosen that area of study for a reason, because this is where their interest lies. So depending on where the businesses are that are looking to hire, from the panel today, if there is anybody that is interested, depending on where you are, would depend on availability. But I would be confident that we can find suitable apprentices. I have a resourcer that works alongside me that can find apprentices in places water can't get to sometimes.
Okay, that's good. Excellent. Any questions? Claire, you're at the top of my screen. What's on your mind?
I suppose what's on my mind, I mean, this was only tentative, but I came along anyway because I'm in marketing, so it made sense for me to come along to this. And you said marketing apprentices, so I didn't have that digital tag onto it. Now, my concern is that as a marketer, the digital side of things is not the bit I specialise in. I do some, but not a lot. So there's not a lot that I think I could bring to the party for this young individual. And as you've said, Russell, you know, young people are very savvy now. And, you know, I'm thinking of my husband, he's a carpenter. So if you've got an apprentice, there's loads he could teach that apprentice because things haven't really changed. Whereas for a digital marketer, I think I would struggle myself to give them, I could give them jobs to work on, but they would probably have greater knowledge for some of this that they've learned than I've got. And that would be my concern, I think, is that it's such a fast moving area and it's so vast that my business, specialising in marketing communications, possibly they could bring a lot of knowledge to the business, but I don't know whether I could give them enough training that would be valuable to them.
Okay. I think my response to that would be, you know, if you had a list of, you know, sort of tasks, roles, responsibilities that you could give them, for me to go away and you know, speak to the digital marketing team that deliver this and say, listen, this is what this company do. This is their area of expertise. Yeah. Does it work or doesn't it work? Okay. And you know, I would absolutely come back to you and say, I'm sorry, no, it doesn't. You're right. There isn't a match here. Yeah. You know, because as I sort of mentioned at the top of the call, Claire, you know, we're more than willing to give information, advice, and guidance without any commitment that there's going to be a sell at the end of it, because it's important that we inform people, you know, and inform the market. And you know, whilst I never ever want to turn business away, of course, it has to be right. It has to be right for you, but more importantly, it has to be right for them. Exactly, and their experience has to be right. And to be honest with you, Claire, there is a requirement. You know, if the role is completely wrong, then they would never get through endpoint assessment anyway. And that's what we would do the work at the front for, to say, does it match? Does the roles and responsibilities match? Can we get them through endpoint assessment? Is this apprenticeship going to be meaningful?
Yeah.
I think if you take Claire's point to the next level, you know, there's some businesses that aren't in marketing at all and have no, it's not as if they've got a marketing team there already and they'd be looking as an apprentice to come in to actually, you know, run that with no experience of it. Is that still workable, or are you looking for them to be actually in a marketing environment with people who could mentor them?
No, not at all. You know, this absolutely does work for businesses that don't really have, you know, much of an imprint. I would be surprised if there was many businesses out there that don't do any marketing, you know, at all, completely zero. So even if they've got somebody that says, well, yeah, I do a little bit of this and I do a little bit of that, well, that's absolutely fine. You're their mentor. All you're going to do is say, well, this is, you know, let's sit down, let's have a strategy. We want a social media presence. How do we get there? And the young person can take that on. To be honest with you, that in some respects, it would be a great environment, because it would, you know, the young person would actually own it. There's an apprentice that I've just placed in a car showroom business in Swindon, who weren't really promoting their business very well. It was all word of mouth, but they couldn't grow the business. because they didn't have a digital presence. So the apprentice has gone in there. They've got a manager who knows what, he has a vision in his head, but he just doesn't know where, how to get there. So the apprentice is going to go and do that for them.
Because I was just thinking then, if I was taking on a plumber, plumbing apprentice, there's no way I'd put a plumbing apprentice in a company that didn't do plumbing.
Yes.
But
I go. Yeah, of course.
This is so you're geared up to give perhaps a little bit more mentorship and guidance to that individual. And
absolutely. I mean, one thing that I didn't mention that I probably should have done when I was just presenting the standard itself is that the apprentice gets assigned what we call a pathway planner. For different training providers, they have different names, skills coaches, or but what the pathway planner's job is to do is to manage the apprentice through the program from Intequal side. So they do monthly progress reviews with them, for instance, and do their portfolio work with them. So that is very much a mentoring and a guiding role from our side. So if you couple that to, a direct report in a business, then those two things should work in tandem. Yeah. For that young person. Cool. So I wouldn't have any qualms or reservations about a young person going in where there wasn't that much marketing being done.
Yeah,
I think that would work.
Good, excellent, thank you. So any other questions, Simon?
Hello.
No.
Yes, I do have a couple. Well, I think between Claire and Kevin, you've covered my question quite nicely, because we're a recruitment business with a very small marketing function.
Okay.
This would be a top potential way of expanding that quite nicely, but I think you've covered that really nicely. But my only other question was just because the wage for under 19s is so small, do many of your clients provide some form of an uplift for them?
Yes and no. Some businesses just, they can't afford to, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, I think it's £4.30, isn't it, at the moment? Is the minimum. We would, I think that equates. I think it's about £161 a week, isn't it? I think something like that on a 37.5 hour. I mean, we would recommend 175 as the minimum. So it's only £15 more. Some do. Some will incentivize. But they'll attach it to performance on the apprenticeship. So, at, say, for instance, on the infrastructure technician, how it used to be structured with the exams, they might say, right, for each of the exams that you pass, because they're going to come along every 3 months, every 2.5, every 3 months, we're going to incentivize you, and each pass will give you an extra £250. Your salary will stay the same, but we'll incentivize you, by giving something that's attached to performance in relation to your apprenticeship. You don't have to. There's certainly no, prerequisite for that. But I think you should remember there that the £4.30 only lasts for the first 12 months. So right. Once you get to the 12 months mark, then they would have to then go on to the minimum wage for their age bracket. Yeah. And then the program's 16 months long, so that would then last another 4 months.
Right.
So some do, some don't. I mean, I think with you guys, a recruitment company, it's in a sales environment. Essentially, if you wanted to, you could attach an incentive on there for every new business or every 10 new businesses that you bring on that's directly associated to the work that you've done on your social media campaigns. We're going to we'll pay you a small bonus, or I mean, I think what I've always said, as far as the finances go, what I've always said to a lot of businesses is money does talk. Of course it is. That's just the world that we live in, unfortunately. However, I'm always a little bit put on on edge, if you like, if an applicant is focused on what they're going to earn, because it should be about the opportunity and not necessarily what they're going to. Okay, they've got to live. They might have a car. They've got to pay the insurance or tax, or and they want to go out at weekends with their mates. Of course they do, absolutely. But it should be to the applicants about what they're going to be earning in 3 years' time or in 5 years' time, not what they're going to be earning in 6 months' time. And I'm always a little bit nervous if an applicant, well, how much money am I going to get, right on the doorstep? So.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. It's got to be, you want them to be focused on the learning and getting better rather than, this is just something to fill the time with.
Yeah,
they're not going to put the effort into the coursework, and they probably won't last the course anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, and equally, you don't want them not to be able to go out with their mates at the weekend. They're 17, 18. That's all I wanted to do when I was 17. 18.
That's all you're still doing now, Russell.
I unfortunately, my first job was on one of Margaret Thatcher's YTSs back in the 80s, and for British Rail as it was then, and I think I was paid £27.10, I think it was, a week. Something like that. Obviously that was worth a lot more then, than it would be now. But so unfortunately, I felt the pain then.
Yeah.
Well, likewise, I did A levels and then a degree, and of course you don't get paid anything for that, so you've got to get part-time jobs and things like that. But you do it because you want to do it, don't you? And love it.
Yeah, university, you'll end up with debt, not £4.30 an hour. So.
Yeah, well, no, for sure. I went back to education when I was 30 and did a degree because I for some reason I wanted at that point to be a probation officer, and I was going to do something different, and that was until I actually spoke to a probation officer who completely put me off. So I never went down that route. So I had a load of debt. I had a degree, but not the one that I use, unfortunately.
Okay.
It was a good experience.
So, Katie, any questions from you?
I don't think so. Generally, I have to admit, it wasn't quite exactly what I was expecting from what you'd written. That I didn't realize it would be just about the digital marketing side, but it is an area where we kind of might be interested in an apprentice.
What's your business, Katie? What do you do?
We offer carpentry and decorating services mainly to principal contractors, so new build housing.
Okay.
So we did have a marketing manager who has left us for various reasons, and we've taken on an agency to do our inbound marketing.
Right.
But the sort of day-to-day stuff on the website and social media and stuff, we're still sort of doing in-house between us, so that I could see that could be a role for one of your apprentices.
Yes, well, absolutely, it would work perfectly. If those roles and responsibilities are currently spread thinly, across different people, and maybe that's not their, absolute skill set, then it would be a perfect opportunity for a young person to come in and take that responsibility.
I've had to sort of listen in whilst doing other things today, unfortunately, just because but I don't know if you covered it, but would they be interested in sort of doing it from home or flexibly, because it's quite adaptable to that kind of thing, just because we're spread across Hampshire, and we've got an office in Southampton and an office in Berkshire, but they're all small. So I'm just wondering, sort of looking at where you are and where they are, whether that would be an option.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it would. We've been onboarding apprentices throughout the pandemic that have gone straight into a remote work from home. I think what you have to do then is you have to be very particular about who you hire. That model probably wouldn't suit a 16-year-old. And that's with all respect to 16-year-olds, because there are some really switched on young people out there. But somebody who has the maturity and the self-management to be able to work remotely, you're probably looking at a 19, 20-year-old. But yeah, absolutely that would work.
Yeah. Okay.
I think your point there, Katie, is that there are other providers around, the colleges, there are other independents, I presume, Russell, in different sectors. So, but the principles that Russell has talked about apply no matter what it is. The content of the course will change, but the overall principles will all be the same.
Yeah.
Cool. Good. Sabrina, anything from you?
Hang on. Yes, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I was just going to let you know that I am here. I don't really have anything to add. My concerns would be similar to what the others have said, but I always like to keep an open mind. We grow trees, which is a world away from digital stuff. We don't have a marketing department, but we have one very enthusiastic young manager who uses social media to promote in a, as I say, an enthusiastic but small way. I'm sure it's something we will get to. But at the moment we have a lot of priorities, and marketing and the web is not one of them. But it's opened my eyes a bit.
Well, that's absolutely fine. As I I go back to the point that I made, that one of my roles is to inform and guide people from all sectors, and you do an incredible job with our carbon, our carbon footprint, and trying to bring that down by planting as many trees as you possibly can, which I know is, Boris Johnson's, one of his go-to things, that we're going to plant 30 million, is it, or something? He's got some number, hasn't he, that he keeps going back to, that I hear from him. So, if it is something you're going to come back to when it time is good, it is always about timing for a business, because we wouldn't want to place a young person in a business where they're not going to be supported correctly, because the business just isn't ready yet, and that's nobody's fault, Sabrina. So absolutely more than happy that when the time is right, you can get my contact details from Kevin, and we can have a conversation then, and I can talk you through whether or not there have been any big structural changes that have taken place.
So
okay, thank you.
The grant, the £3,000 grant, you think runs out end of August, possibly September. So there is a bit of a, if you want to get this, then get it.
Yeah, let me, grants for apprentices. Let me just see when it's September. September the 30th that runs out. So the £3,000 is available up until then as it stands at the moment. The £1,000 for the age grant, the under 19, that will stay there because that's been there forever. We are getting whispers, but they're not confirmed yet, certainly not by the Chancellor, because he won't confirm it until the last minute. But there are whispers that it may be extended again, because it certainly looks like the furlough is going to be extended further, and these two things actually do run in tandem. So we're thinking that, and also we think they may. The government set aside, I don't know, I can't remember the number, 500 million or something like that for this. And the uptake has been really low. There's loads of money left in that pot. So I think they may well extend it, because the Chancellor likes making big statements at the dispatch box and making himself look like he's.
And would it link into the Kickstarter scheme as well, where you take somebody on that's been long-term unemployed, and funding for that, and then put them on an apprenticeship? Yeah,
you can do. I mean, we don't get involved in Kickstart personally. I mean, the problem with Kickstart, of course, is that there's no structured training to it.
Yeah.
You know, it is literally, you can have a young person who's been long-term employed, and the government will pay their wages for 6 weeks, is it? I think something like that. I don't know too much about it.
Yeah.
But again, I know uptake has been woefully low on that as well. A lot of them are closed. The different areas are closing down. But it's been, you know, between us 4, 5 and the gatepost, it's been shockingly managed. The people that have been able to set themselves up as Kickstarter hosts of.
I mean, they started off with you had to take 40 of them on it in one. It was like, no one's going to bloody do that, and then they opened it out anyway. So
yeah, I know, absolutely.
They badly thought out.
Well, again, I make the point that it sounded great at the dispatch box.
Yeah.
You know, from the Chancellor,
yeah.
but the actual in reality, it's been a lot.
Only civil servants could come up with that. So I think you might have touched on this, but I didn't come across to me, was the in this sort of virtual world that we're living.
Yep.
What's your experience of bringing an apprentice in who is remote working as to one in the office? Does it have to be in the office, or if it is remote, are you finding that's working?
Yeah, it is working. You know, I think if we go right back to March last year, it didn't, because that was natural, because suddenly everybody went from home. And I know that I went from having 45 vacancies on my board to having none on my board, because everybody went, well, sorry, we've got to go home and work. But over the last 15 months, you know, businesses have got their head around it. Training provide. I mean, we were already delivering remotely anyway, so it didn't, as far as our actual delivery goes, it didn't make one jot of difference. Again, Kevin, I go back to the point that it does work. Absolutely, it does work, and we prove that every single day. It's about the young person and making sure it's the right young person to be able to self-manage themselves if they're working at the kitchen table or, you know, in their bedroom, and not distracted by their PlayStation or Xbox, whichever.
Which isn't easy to find those.
It isn't. No,
it's not easy to find adults that do that either. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, my sons would never be able to do it, because I know come 7 o'clock in the evening, bandwidth on my internet drops through the floor, because they've got about 7 devices on the go in their bedroom at any one point. But, another argument.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think time-wise we're about there. So, any final questions from anybody? Anything that they want to ask?
I did have one, which was, Russell, why you think the uptake is so low? Is it a recruitment issue? Is it just trying to find people, or is it the businesses aren't interested?
I think it's a bit of all of them. I think it's impossible to put one, put your finger on one thing. I mean, I currently have got 38 vacancies that I'm working on at the moment. Uptake in my area is pretty good, but I have a lot of businesses that I've been working with for a long period of time and get repeat business, and there's a cycle, and they will always take on 4 apprentices every year. I think uptake. I think there's a degree of nervousness, and that's still very much COVID related. That people just businesses are still a little bit nervous about what's going to happen in the economy. It's quite frustrating, because the skills gap in the IT and computing area is worse than it probably is anywhere in any other sector, and we really do need to get as many young people onto apprenticeships to start filling that, to start future proofing the economy. Because if you look at some of the forecasts that come from the different think tanks and everything, there is quite scary stuff in there. So I don't think there's any one particular reason other than a bit of everything.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thanks, Simon. Anything else, Claire?
No, thank you very much.
No, good, excellent. Well, look, obviously, for you guys here and the people watching the recording, best way to contact you, Russell, if they're interested. I mean, if you send me this PDF, I'll get this round to everybody.
Yeah,
so
and
that
if you
they
want
can download it. Yeah.
yeah, and if you want to just share my email address, I'll stick my signature's on my email address, with my mobile number on there. Anybody wants to contact me directly, absolutely more than happy to do that. If you want to follow up comms, more than happy to do that. Whatever it takes. And guys, as I say, even if from today, I don't get any business, it's been a real pleasure meeting you all, and I hope that you've all taken something from this and just increase your knowledge about apprenticeships, funding, what's available, what's out there. But if you do have an opening, then I'd be, that would be even better.
Excellent.
Cool.
Fabulous. Lovely. Good. Well, thanks Russell, and thanks
You're welcome
for attending, and we'll see you again soon. Okay.
Yep.
Much.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.